I watched them fall. It's the most blatantly obvious thing that I've had happen right in front of my eyes, if that makes sense.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people. Because these angels or angelic forces or nature spirits, as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
And all of a sudden I hear him go, whoa, or, something like that. So I look up. And as I look up, I see this thing.
And I said, I've never seen a butterfly like you before.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
As soon as I spoke to it, it turns around and makes eye contact with me. And then it stands upright.
And it was at that moment that I saw it was like an orange light appear above this row of trees. From this sort of orange light, this thing appeared. Its wings were actually like sycamore leaf shaped.
And I started talking to them. I'm like, hi, are y'all the dwarves? And I would hear whispers that would say, hi, yeah, you want to play? And it wasn't just my imagination. And I had told them, I'm like, my dwarves, they like beer, And my dad's like, yeah, sure, your dwarves like beer. And they were holding a conversation, and his beer slid upwards instead of downwards, how the house was tilted. And him and my brothers jumped up.
So I stopped calling out Adam, and I'm just kind of, my mind draws a blank, and I stop behind that tree stump. I'm pretty close to it now because I took a few steps forward. And I see this thing.
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. Tonight, we're traveling to Oklahoma to talk with Luna. Luna, how are things going in Oklahoma tonight?
Pretty good. We survived the big winter storm, so that's a success for Oklahomans.
Yeah, you know what? My mom up in Canada, I called her yesterday and she was like, it's minus 29. And I went out and did groceries and shoveled the steps, and she's like in her 70s. And I just don't know how some people do it. I'm down here in Costa Rica, and because I can't handle that shit. So good for you for surviving it.
Yeah, I lived in Alaska for 10 years, and this stuff doesn't stop Alaskans, So, but like, we get the big storm warnings like a week in advance, and everything shuts down. So it's different.
Luna, you're not a fan of the show, but one of my favorite jokes to make is that it's not the start of a podcast unless somebody starts talking about the weather. So thanks for helping me check that box.
That is sick.
Okay, if it's okay with you, I'm going to spend 1 minute or so introducing you to the format of the show, and I also do it because you never know who's dropping in for the first time. Is it cool with you if I take 1 minute to do that, please?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, here on Fascinating Fae, Luna, the first kind of order of business is that we do not try to convince anybody of anything. That's a very important rule. It's not a platitude. The phenomenon is difficult to get your head around as an experiencer. And if you're not like somebody who really intimately understands this stuff, trying to be brought to understanding is a super difficult task for you as the experiencer to do for, an outside listener. It's also just like, I think, interferes with the truth of what's going on coming out. So, I just really want to hear what's happening and doesn't really take the form or the need to convince here on the show. So no pressure to do that.
Okay.
The second thing is that it is actually very brave to come on Fascinating Fae. That's a big part of the reason I do anonymity, because I think it allows somebody to step into the truth of their story as well. But notwithstanding that, it is actually brave to just give your voice to this subject matter. I don't know why. I have my ideas. It's probably a patriarchal thing, but the fairy subject matter gets kind of shat on in terms of like the paranormal hierarchy, and talking about fairy stuff can be isolating, especially if you're experiencing it and you don't really have a place to go to understand it in contemporary terms. It can be really isolating too. So bravery coming forward, is a real thing. It's not a platitude. I do think you and all the guests that talk on the show are brave, and I just want you to know that before we get started as well.
Well, thank you. It's brave of you to have a podcast that talks about the things that happen that nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah, you can talk about ghosts and people will listen. You can talk about UFOs and people will listen. Bigfoot, there's tons of that. Like hundreds of thousands of people are tuned into that. The fairy encounter stuff is very limited. It's just a few thousand people that are kind of tuned into it. So that'll grow over time, but for now, it's kind of a niche part of the paranormal spectrum in terms of discussion. And for that reason, it does really take bravery. And thanks for that. Thanks for saying that about the show. Final thing, my interview style is that I don't like to interrupt my guests because I also think that can interfere with storytelling. But, I'm not here to leave you hanging out in space and time with no support. So what I like to just remind people is please give us some context, ease us into kind of what your stories are. If you feel comfortable, introduce yourself a little tiny bit just so that people can get a sense of who they're listening to, and then if you'd just be so kind, if you'd let us know tonight about some of these cool experiences that you and I chatted about offline. Here's a great chance for you to tell me again with more detail in your own voice and with everybody getting a chance to listen and learn from it thereafter. So Luna, if you'd be so kind, if you could just kind of walk myself and the audience into it tonight, I would be so grateful.
Yeah, I'm Luna. I'm 49 years old. I live in Oklahoma. I've lived all over the country, and wherever I go, interesting things happen. So I have a history of things disappearing and reappearing at random, and not just, it disappeared from the bedroom and reappeared in the bathroom. No. I mean, disappeared in Alaska and reappeared 2 moves later. That kind of thing. I had a pair of gloves disappear on me for 3 years. Didn't have them, looked everywhere, knew where they should have been, moved twice. Then the first winter in Indiana, I went to put on my coat that I had worn in other places since then, and they were in the pocket.
Oh man, okay, let me help you with this storytelling a little bit. So when did they first go missing? Tell me about that.
Okay, so we were living in Washington, and they went missing, it was about 2007, something like that. And then we moved to Indiana, and they got lost somewhere in between there. I saw them last in Washington. And then I moved to Oklahoma, and then I moved back, and in 2011, in a coat that I'd had for 5 or 6 years that I'd been wearing every winter, they were in the pocket of that coat. And it's how does this happen? That's 3 or 4 years these gloves have been gone. What in the world happened?
When you found them, what was your reaction? Can you remember how you felt?
Shock, absolute shock, yelling, "What the actual fuck?" My husband at the time was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Do you remember those gloves?" And he was like, "Yeah, you bought them in Seattle." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, I just found them in the coat that I've been wearing every winter for 3 or 4 years now." It was just confusion, just trying to figure out how in the world it happened, and the only thing I can think of is, I mean, supernatural paranormal causes, because I mean, I'd washed that coat. There was no way these black leather gloves were in that coat for 3 years. It's crazy. I made a Reddit post and you reached out to me because I watched a pair of scissors fall, but they didn't actually fall. They actually made it on the hook, but I watched them fall into the kitchen sink.
So I have my own thoughts and feelings about these objects that disappear and reappear. And I'm with you on this idea of like paranormal explanation in the face of a lack of another rational explanation.
Right.
And so here's what I personally think, and I'm just kind of curious if this resonates with you at all, right? Assuming, this is just an assumption, you have like a fairy friend, for example, and what a fairy is, I have no fucking idea, but let's just assume you've got one kicking around. In the event that they do like a takeaway and give back over a prolonged period of time into an extremely obvious place, they either do one of two things, which is really interesting. They will do a center placement. So they'll return your object right in the center of somewhere, the center of the floor, the center of the table, for example, where you look at it and you're like, I know that wasn't right there in the middle 5 fucking minutes ago. How did that get there? Or they'll give it back to you very intimately, like you're describing, like putting it back in your pocket. Also, people having things taken from pockets and put back in pockets is a game they like to play as well. I've heard many, many times. But I think part of it is trying to actually get your attention so that there's an acknowledgement of their presence.
Right.
And I think that they're kind of coy about it, and they do it in a way that is designed to pique curiosity, or in my opinion, fascination. Because I think that fascination kind of fuels them somehow. Like your fascination as a human, like is somehow like a battery pack that they can draw force from. And I think that can strengthen the capabilities of the Fae in question. And I think it can also unlock stuff for you as well. But principally, it's a lesson about the nature of reality, number one, because it means that reality is not as real as you think it is. If objects can just go through, secure walls and into pockets where there shouldn't be, and where they've been checked 1,000 times. And then it's also something about the nature of time not being quite as linear as we think. Because for you, it's missing for 3 years over many different geographical locations. But for them, I wonder, does the event all happen in one moment? Like they take your gloves and put them back all at once because they have a more observer status of time. Those are my thoughts. I'm just curious, how do you interpret the gloves being possible? I'm just really curious what your take on it is.
Well, I mean, there's no rational explanation for it. There's only a supernatural, because, it was me and my ex-husband living in that house, so it wasn't like anyone else was messing with them. But I think, and incidentally enough, that's the last time I saw those gloves. They disappeared after that. I think that for the Fae, you can assume it's a culture that's not seen by everybody. And just my nature, I know that would make me extremely mischievous if people can't see me doing something, and, not to be harmful or malevolent, just to entertain myself. Oh, they need this? I'm going to move it on them. You know what I mean? So I think some of it's mischievousness. I think some of it is, they get something off of our curiosity. Maybe it does fuel them in some way. But no, that's the last time I saw those gloves, was that day. It's the last time I wore them. I put them back in those pockets and still have that coat, and they're still not there.
Oh, that's really interesting sub detail. So they actually came back and then disappeared again,
Yeah, they came back for the day.
which suggests
Yeah.
that you'll get them back again at some future juncture.
Man, I hope so. They were expensive gloves. They were nice and warm.
You know, check your pockets after we're done talking. Weird stuff happens
I
when
will.
when the show is getting made.
I will check my coat.
It's weird. Like if me and another person are talking about a real phenomenon, and I have this kind of like working hypothesis that the Fae are listening and participating in episode production. More than one person who I have spoken to has had objects return after prolonged periods of time, either while talking to me or just directly after hanging up. So, no
Nice.
promises, but it's nothing I would be doing. It would just be a byproduct of, I think, a furthering of that kind of hypothesis where like they get something from it. And if both of you and I are talking about it and it also piques other people's curiosity in the listening audience, it's like ding, 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 ding. They get, I don't know, they can, I do think that like even a person listening 1,000 miles away could, through enough fascination in whatever's going on, feed the phenomenon. I really do think.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the old mythological stories and some contemporary fiction that talk about how, gods fade if you don't give them attention. So maybe the attention is what fairies need to thrive. So it doesn't matter if it's in your living room or 1,000 miles away, there's a fairy getting recognized. So it's giving them energy? I don't know.
I think it's something like that. I don't still, after 2 years, can't quite articulate it, but I know that they kind of know your heart. They can read you, and then, And I'm not convinced or even sure that all Fae encounters, experiences, and energies are good or bad. I just can't assign a motivation to it, but I do think that intuition is shared amongst many, many people, that it's kind of like somehow the tricksteriness of it produces an outcome that they benefit from. I'll just leave it at that.
Right.
Okay, so these scissors. Now this is why I reached out to you, because this is fascinating. And I won't go too far. I'm going to let you blow my mind here for a second. But I've spoken to other people that have had similar things happen, and I'll share those with you when you're done. So if you could just kind of set the scene and take myself and the audience into the scissors event, if you could, please.
All right. So I was refilling my water bottle, and I used those little drink packets to make it better or taste better at least. And I have these heavy duty kitchen shears that I used to just clip the top off of the packet and dump it in, right? So I clipped it off, and I went to automatically hang the scissors back up on their hook over the sink. And I let go, and I'd missed the hook, and I watched, and it was almost in slow motion. I watched them fall and clatter into the sink, but I didn't hear it. And I was like, wait a minute. And so I looked up, and there they were, just hanging. Like they'd been hanging there for hours and nobody had touched them. Because, when you hang stuff up, it jostles a little until it hangs still, right? No, these things had not been touched. They were just hanging there. And I'm like, what just happened? And then I made a Reddit post about it because I was like, okay, I've been following the paranormal thread for a while, and I've not really read a lot of convincing stories, but somebody needs to tell me what the hell just happened, because I watched them fall. It's the most blatantly obvious thing that I've had happen right in front of my eyes, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It's fascinating. So when you say that it was almost like slow motion, can you try to describe that a little bit better, please?
Well, so I'm a very panicky individual. So when I drop things, I'm always like, ugh, and so I jump back because that was my automatic response. And I just remember just my head just incrementally going down, watching these things fall slowly. And I couldn't believe it because I'm like, it should have already hit, but it's still just so slow. And it was like someone had filmed it in slow motion. I don't know how else to explain it. It was weird.
It's extremely fascinating. You know, I wonder a lot on the show about this idea of, are the Fae us or are we them? Or is what is inside of us, like our human soul, not that different than a Fae soul, you know? And so like, does our immortal soul possess the same capabilities as a Fae entity does? And is this why, A, we're able to communicate with them, and then B, why stuff like what you're describing happens? Like, I'll give you another example. It's really interesting and not exactly the same, but to me, when I listen to your story, I think immediately about this example. There's this guest named Ruby, one of my favorite guests on the show. She had this like long drawn out story that made her realize that there was this Fae that she was actually like getting visited and communicated with by. And it took the form of a plate that she had go missing. And she looked and looked and looked for it. And then she bought another plate because she couldn't find it. And when the new plate came, she got a knock on the door and she went back into the kitchen and the old plate was sitting on the middle of the stove.
Oh.
You know, having been returned at the exact same moment that the new plate, the replacement plate arrived. How mischievous and funny is that, right? So when she realized that that was the case, it kind of like circled the wagons in her brain, and now she finally had a complete circle and she could understand. And not that long after, like a day after, she was in the bathroom, and she has two young twin children, and they were having a bath. And she has kind of like a bath, you know, rack thing like most people do on their shower or whatever. And she realized that there was a very, very sharp, large like hat pin that she had taken off and put up there. And it was just sitting right above her children, you know, and she got really, really scared. So she grabbed it. She said, "Oh my God, I can't believe, you know, this was above them as I was giving them a bath down here. It could have fallen and really hurt them, you know." And as she was thinking this, she went to hand it to her husband. And when she opened her hand, it was gone.
Oh, wow.
And they still haven't found it.
Oh, wow.
So much like you're watching this sharp object fall and you're having that kind of panic response, and then in Ruby's case, the offending object is dematerializing. In your case, it is pretty much the same, which is it is returning back to a different phase state, which is that of a hung object that's been hung there for a while. I know exactly what you mean when you say it's not like moving, like you just dropped it on the hook. Because it takes a second.
Like, they should have been rocking back and forth.
Correct.
Because they're hanging from a hook and you just put them up there. No, they were dead still.
Well, if you, let's say just conceivably that your perception was off and you had hit the hook, you thought you had dropped them, but you had hit the hook, then of course they would be moving, right? It's entirely possible that you were trying to hit the hook, thought you missed the hook, but you did hit the hook. So what you saw, you know, starting to fall didn't happen because the hook caught it. In that case, they would be moving, absolutely. But you're describing something entirely different, which is like your automatic reaction, which is to jump back. I'm the same way. I have mobility issues, and if I drop something, it's super, super rough for me because I can't get out of the way fast enough, and I get like full body like pain if I move too fast sometimes. So jump scares are like not my thing. But anyway, I digress. I can imagine what you're describing. And then the fact that the time essentially seemed to slow down, which is what I'm hearing you describe. And then and then you saw them but didn't hear them. That's also extremely fascinating.
Yeah, and like when I hang them up, it makes a certain noise. And I didn't hear the noise, which also further led me to believe that they had missed the hook. I mean, not to mention that I'm watching them drop, but nothing that is a normal part of that process of just simply hanging up a pair of scissors happened. And that's what really blew my mind. I was just like, There was no noise of them being hung up or rocking back and forth against the thing that they hang against. There was no noise of them hitting the sink. There was no noise surrounding this entire incident, but there was plenty of visuals. You know, I mean, the falling and then the scissors are hanging there. They're not rocking back and forth. And I stood there for a good 2 or 3 minutes, just mouth open, trying to figure out what the hell just happened.
It's really interesting. I like these small stories so much because there's a lot of information contained in them. Assuming, like, and we're just talking here. There's really no. I'm not an expert. I keep wanting to remind myself and everybody listening of that. So this isn't about like trying to figure it out, but I like to try to figure it out because I've heard so many different stories related to objects and the way that they can be manipulated. The first thing that I just keep coming back to is reality is not quite as solidly real as we think.
Oh, definitely not.
So if it's enough that you were scared of it, genuinely, not like scared is maybe the wrong word, but you know what I mean, startled is probably the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Is that enough to trigger a glitch?
I feel like our reality, because we know there's different dimensions, right? We have science that proves there's different dimensions. I think our reality is so diaphanous that it bleeds over one from the other, and occasionally we catch it. That's what I feel like happens a lot of the times. It's like, oh, that reality bled onto this one, and that's why we caught this instance. Like, when we lived in Alaska, my ex put his keys in the same exact place in a basket every single day without question, because he was notorious for losing things. We moved into a duplex in Alaska, and within a week, he's losing his keys all the time. Never happens. Well, we were there probably 3 or 4 months before a friend of mine who was a pagan witch is like, have you tried feeding the brownies? It's like, excuse me? Have you tried feeding your brownies? And I'm like, first, tell me what a brownie is, because I'm thinking, the brownies from Willow. And I'm like, those little critters are running around? What? And she's like, no, brownies, they're like little fairy spirits for the home. And if you have things go missing a lot regularly, like the same item, try feeding your brownies. They like different things, and it's a trial error. Most of the time, like the stories of old say, a dish of cream. So we started with a dish of cream. Didn't like it. Our Alaskan brownies liked vodka. We started giving them, we'd put it on like a little like saucer, just a little saucer, put maybe a tablespoon in, and you could watch it disappear. You could watch it. And it was too fast for evaporation. You know what I'm saying? But you could just watch the plate dry up. It was crazy. His keys never went missing again.
Okay.
I've had a lot of weird crap happen in my life.
Oh man, I'm enjoying this conversation, Luna. Thanks for taking the step to talk with me. Okay, so describe, I know what you mean, not evaporation, but can you try to describe watching the vodka disappear? What kind of form did that take?
Okay, so if you took maybe a 6-inch saucer plate for under a teacup, we would just fill it to where it was like a 1/2 inch from the edge, right? It's not that much vodka. It's maybe a tablespoon or 2. And you could just sit there in real time and watch it recede on the plate from the edge. And we'd just sit there and we would watch it and be like, this is the coolest thing. Anytime I bake, I'd leave them like a little morsel, but really they like the vodka. And anytime anything went missing, we'd go check the vodka plate and be like, is it empty? Have they had their offering today? Sure enough, we'd give them vodka. Whatever we were looking for would turn up. Never failed. That's the most active fairy activity was in that house that I've had in my life, because those brownies were constant.
Wow. That's really, really fascinating. I've heard a number of times that they are partial to alcohol.
I'd never heard that. Like I said, all the stories, they're like a dish of cream, and I think it was like fresh bread or something. I don't remember, but it was always a dish of cream. And we had tried everything. We tried juice, we tried cream, we tried straight milk. And I was like, you know what? We're just gonna try. We have some vodka left over from a party. We're just gonna try a little bit of alcohol, see what happens. And that was it, man. they they liked us so much that like when my ex was deployed, they would keep me safe.
Can you give me some examples of that, or how you feel that took place?
So I have two instances which I can attribute to brownies. There was one night a guy tried to break into our house, but the door was frozen shut, which had never happened before. I was in like the deadbolt was shut, but the storm door was frozen to the frame. Hadn't snowed that day, hadn't rained that day. It was just frozen to the frame. I'd been in and out that door all day. But when the guy tried to break in, he couldn't get the door open.
Oh, that's fascinating as well. I got to tell you, sometimes when I'm listening to a person talk, I'll get full body goosebumps all over my body, and that is happening as you're talking about the door being frozen to the frame.
Oh, that's exciting. And then one time, it was the last winter I lived there, so it was the winter of 2006. In Alaska, they don't plow the roads a lot because it's just going to snow, right? Well, it was March. We had like 6 feet of snow, and they're finally deciding they're going to plow the roads. Okay. Had to get all the cars off the street. So I got up at like 6 a.m., went and worked out, came back, parked in a restaurant parking lot, and walked down this back alley to go home. All right. Now, I know this is outside of the house, but the only thing I can literally attribute this to is fairies, because I was within the boundaries of what I'd call our property. There was a moose and her calf nested in the trees next to the alleyway. And the one thing you do not do is mess with a cow when she has a calf, a moose cow. You just don't. You find another way to exist in the world because they will kill you. I had to walk within 5 feet of these two to get home. It's 40 degrees below zero outside. I'd been walking for 3 blocks at this point. I was freezing and had to get inside. And I just very carefully, while emanating peace and love and just please don't kill me, walked within 5 feet of a moose cow and her calf. And then I had to do it again to get back to my car. And both times, when I walked past her the first time and got into the house, I have never felt such a warm, welcoming feeling of thank God you made it. You know what I mean?
Huh.
It was weird. And I was like, I just felt like there was somebody in the house being like, we saw you, we got you, you're okay. And so then I had to, a couple hours later, when it was time to bring the car back, she was still there. And I peeked out the window to look, and she was still there. And I was like, I'm praying to the house brownies. I've got to walk past this cow again and get to my car. Please don't let her trample me. And I walked by and she looked at me again, and I could tell that she was just going to stay there, which is just very unnatural moose behavior. I was way too close to her calf. She should have trampled me to death. She let me pass her twice.
Moose are like that, super dangerous, and bear. Like, there's a couple of animals who you do not want to get in between them and their young. Actually, pretty much any animal will give you a run for your money if you get between them and their young.
There's times I've opened my door when I lived in Alaska. There's a moose out front, and I just shut it and call work. I'm going to be late. There's a moose in my front yard.
Yeah, people don't really understand how big they are until you really get to see one. I mean,
they really don't. Like, I drove a Toyota Paseo for like 8 years when I lived up there, and my car could go under a moose. It was so tall.
It's like 2 refrigerators on stilts. It's really strange to try to describe. Bigger sometimes.
I was trying to relate to someone how big they were, and I'm like, I think the biggest recorded rack on a moose was 16 foot across, something crazy like that. It was some insane number, and I'm like, that they're huge. You don't understand. Horses look small in comparison.
It's really interesting that you're describing that feeling and then the animal behaving in a pacified way. I really do think that the Fae have the ability to communicate with animals, and that animals are seeing.
Absolutely.
I think animals see the etheric pretty much full time.
Yeah, and would explain cats so much.
Huh. Yeah. Do you have any interesting stories about cats? Do you have cats?
No, I'm really, really allergic to cats, so I don't.
But it's funny that you mentioned that because cats have come up a lot in season 2. I'll just briefly share and then we can move on to some more stuff that you might want to tell me about. This woman, Rachel, she had a near-death experience because of a bad drug interaction. And she was like slowly dying for several days. And
Oh, God.
she then died, came back to life all in the space of about 3 minutes in the ambulance ride. And her blood type changed during the 3 minutes that she was getting resuscitated.
Her blood type changed?
Her fucking blood type changed, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, she has this distinct, like, memory of like the afterlife experience and then realizing like who she really was and then making a conscious choice to come back. And then when she did come back, the doctors were absolutely fucking perplexed. Like, because they took her blood when she got into the ambulance and they took her blood when she got to the hospital. And during the time, it had changed.
That's weird. That's awesome. But that's weird.
This is all to tell something about cats and then we can move on. But so when she came back from that near death experience, she had a, like in the sort of 6 weeks afterwards, she was having like her third eye open essentially. And so she was seeing stuff that like with her physical open eyes. And at one point she had like an argument with a partner and they hung up the phone, and then she was looking in the room and she was like, oh, there's this like dark mass up in the corner. And she looked at it and she's like, oh, that's our fight. Like she knew exactly what it was. Like that's our fight. She could see this like dark energy mass, for lack of a better word. And as she was looking at it, this dark energy mass sort of started to come down from up on the wall and down towards, the middle of the room. And then her cat saw it. And the cat ran over, tackled it, like jumped on it, tackled it to the ground and diffused it, basically, like dematerialized it. And then the cat ran up the cat tree and had a 6-hour sleep. But she watched that happen. Like she saw it, she acknowledged it, she was looking at it, and then she watched the cat notice it, the cat run over, jump on this ball of dark energy, like break it up until it was gone, and then have a big long sleep afterwards. Fascinating stuff. Yeah.
That is very fascinating. Wow.
Truly. Okay, well, Luna, all of your stories so far have been absolutely riveting. Do you have any more weird stuff that you want to add to the pile?
I have so many. Well, I'll let you choose. You can choose between my UFO experience or what I swear to God is a vampire.
Oh, well, do I have to choose? I want to hear both.
I mean, you can hear both. I just don't want to take up too much of your time.
No such thing. Every Fascinating Fae episode is like 2 hours minimum usually, so.
So around 1995, winter of 94, winter of 95, somewhere in there, I had to go pick my cousin up. I was in Indiana. I had to go pick my cousin up from work, and it was late. It was like 10:30 at night. So I was picking her up. We were coming home. And at the time, I was 18, living with my parents still. Had just graduated high school, all that. And we lived on a river. And we have to cross a bridge to get to the road to get to our house. So we're coming up to the bridge, and all you see is this bright, I don't want to say neon, but the effect it had was almost neon in the glow. Different colored lights. And I stopped in the middle of the bridge. It's not a huge bridge, it's a small one. nobody behind us, 11 o'clock at night, looking up, and there is a UFO the size of a fucking cruise ship hovering in the air over the river. Probably, I don't know, half a mile up. It wasn't super high in the sky, like up in the atmosphere. It was low enough that you could see details. But the lights were so damn bright. It was just like it was oblong. It hovered. My cousin and I were just sitting there open mouth, like, what the hell is this? And like the lights were pink and blue and purple and like just softly colored neon. I don't know how else to explain it, but it was enormous. It was tall and it just hung there. It didn't make any noise. Like I turned the car off, rolled down the windows. It's winter and we're just like, are we hallucinating? What is going on? And like my cousin finally was like, girl, you better put your foot down before we get abducted. So we just went home and told my mom. And so we all got back in the car and went back. I mean, maybe 5 minutes had passed because we went in screaming and it was gone. It was gone. But like the river was quiet. The wildlife was quiet. Everything was quiet. All you could see, there was nothing else. You could only see. You couldn't hear anything.
Wow, fascinating. So, like when you say the size of a cruise ship, that's really big.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how big cruise ships were until years later, so I didn't really have a frame of reference to describe just how big it was. I'm like, it was bigger than a football field, but people don't get it. But you say the size of a cruise ship, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, it was that big.
When you say the lights were so bright, just try to get into that a little bit more. How do you mean?
I think it wasn't that they were bright in a way that hurt your eyes. It was they were brightly colored. Like pitch black, and the valley of the river is just covered in a kaleidoscope of these brightly colored, change shifting, you know what I'm saying? It's just the colors were so bright. You would think, because like on our stuff, all lights are primary colors, right? These weren't primary colors. These were bright, bold pinks and purples and blues and greens and orange and just all these different colors that it cycled through. It was like little blinkies, and I don't know. It was nuts. And just like trying to remember it through the shock of seeing what you're seeing and trying to describe it just doesn't do it justice.
Strangely, the UFO phenomenon and the Fae phenomena has a corollary. There's some interrelated thing going on there that I don't exactly understand, but I think is a part of the phenomenon.
I agree.
When I saw my fairy, like I tried to describe to you at the onset of our conversation, I know what it's like to try to give voice to these astonishing colors because they're not of this world. I do understand.
Yeah, it's like you can put a name to the color, but it's not necessarily one you may have seen before. Like it was pink, but it's not a pink you've seen.
I'm feeling that from you, which is why I was asking for more detail about the lights, because I could feel something there needed a little bit better description. Thanks for digging in there and doing that.
Yeah, it's just like the most vivid version of those colors.
When you say it was hovering, it was motionless, I'm guessing?
Yeah, it was motionless and like I said, it wasn't making a noise, but you could almost feel like a hum in the air.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it was like, that hum of that low hum of electricity you get before you shock yourself on something when you touch it. It was like that low hum of electricity. Like you couldn't hear it, but you could definitely feel it. And it's like, ooh, I'm going to touch something. I'm going to get shocked. That's the presence it gave off.
You're doing a very good job of describing this. I'm really like, you're taking me there in my mind's eye. I can see it. You're with your sister again, right?
My cousin.
Sorry, your cousin. My apologies.
No,
I
that's
I
okay.
knew it was a relative, but I got a little bit captivated by the lights and I forgot. So they saw the same thing that you saw. That would be my next question.
Yeah, yeah. They were right there in the car next to me, and like she had noticed the glowing lights before we came around the bend first, and she was like, "Is there a car coming? What is that?" Because this was back in the day before crazy colored headlights, or custom colored headlights. So it's like, where's this pink light coming from? And we come around the corner or the bend, and there's the bridge, and then off on the left side you just see this bright cascade of light, and she's like, what the fuck is going on? And it was the 90s, and we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and for all we knew it could have been fireworks, but there was no sound. And then we get to the bridge and there's just this huge thing hovering in the sky, and we're like, okay, that was not on my list of things to see tonight.
Something that I think you mentioned, but maybe I was just listening a little bit too constructively and I've forgotten. What was the shape of this craft like?
It was oblong, but it was like vastly longer than it was wide. I would say, the classic cigar shape, except, the front was narrow and the back was narrow. Like you could tell it was wider in the middle. It wasn't just cylindrical all the way around.
It sounds so much like the craft that Clyde, a former guest here in season 2, describes. He kind of described it like when he watched it go, he said it sort of like almost appeared to stretch as it was moving forward and then sort of disappeared into itself. And I wonder if the shape has something to do with that ability for them to kind of slip through something as they go.
That's a really good observation. I wish we would have sat longer and just observed it, but this was, I want to say, I don't remember when Fire in the Sky came out, but I know her and I had recently watched it, like within the last 6 months, and was like, we know how this story ends go.
Yeah, that's the Travis Walton story. Such a famous story.
Yeah.
I've heard Travis Walton interviewed probably, I don't know, I want to say 20 times on various podcasts. And his storytelling is always remarkably, like, there's no deviation. I actually believe him, is what I'm trying to say.
No, it's absolutely consistent. I've seen him do interviews. I've seen little things on YouTube talking about his story. I've seen Fire in the Sky. I've seen a documentary, and his story does not change, but people will not believe him. And it's like, alien abductions happen. They do.
All his coworkers were going to be put on trial for murder. They were getting ready to do it because they thought that they had all killed him and left him out there and it was a fake story. And then when he turned up, they were, so I mean, if it's a hoax, those guys, his fellow hoaxsters, were putting themselves at risk of real serious consequences if he didn't turn back up, So
Right.
I don't know. Like, I don't think anybody just for the sake of a fun hoax would do that, would endure going to the police station and getting arrested and being called a murderer and,
The level of detail, and I mean, then there's Communion.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Whitby. Oh, what's his name?
Whitley Strieber? Is that the guy?
Yes, that one. Those are that and
You're taking me down memory lane. I'm 47, so we're about the same age. These are two of the alien movies that freaked me out. That scene in Fire in the Sky when the syrup is dripping and he's under the table,
Yes, those are the 2 movies about aliens that really freaked me out. So it always made me very hesitant if I should come to be in a situation like that. And then there was the one with Mila Jovovich. It was in Alaska, and she was like a psychiatrist or something. That one really freaked me out. And thankfully it was well after my encounter, but it does make one nervous when you see something in the sky you cannot explain. It's like, I think I'll just go indoors.
That's a fascinating visual to have with your cousin, and I hope that the two of you, for as long as you live, get to remind each other of that night, because what a thing to see.
Yeah, it was nuts. I wish there would have been more people around because it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life, and also one of the most terrifying.
Huh. I I've often said with what I saw in 2019 that it's like it fucked up my high level watermark for what's beautiful because it's out of this world.
I would imagine, yeah, and it's like I started having, we'll just call them paranormal experiences, so young that it's so much part of my life that I don't really take notice when something disappears or reappears as often as it happens, unless it's something like those gloves, because I loved those gloves, you know?
If you love an object, it predisposes that object to being the one that is used, like Ruby and her plate. Like wedding rings are really common. They take a lot of wedding rings and give them back. One woman in from the UK, her husband lost his wedding ring, and they looked for it for 3.5 years. And then in an unrelated kind of like trajectory, she started to see stuff on a Ring camera. And then one day she was in her kitchen and she's like, could the fairies like just please give back my wedding ring? Like she just had this weird thought in her head that would never have occurred to her to think. And then she went to go for a walk with her husband that morning. They opened the door to the patio and the wedding ring was right direct center on the deck, right at the door.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
That's amazing.
Isn't it though? Like honestly, your gloves is almost identical in its amazing nature as the wedding ring.
Yeah. I'm telling you what, take care of your house brownies, kids.
Also, just before we move on past it, just so I'm sure I got it, once you started doing vodka to the house brownies in Alaska, your husband's keys started to be chill afterwards?
Yeah, they never disappeared again.
It's interesting.
Then they would take other little things, like if we let the vodka dish get empty, or we missed an offering, then other little things would go missing. But the keys they didn't mess with. Usually they targeted him and his work gear. Which I found funny because he was military, and if he didn't have his proper work gear, he'd get in trouble. So I just always found that amusing.
While you mention offerings, let me ask you a sub question because I'm curious what your answer is to this. And there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just genuinely curious. What do you think of offerings? Like, how do you emotionally process that? Do you feel like they're a god and you have to give them an offering? Like, how does it work out in your mind when you're doing it? I'm curious, like, what it looks like for you.
So I don't think they're a god. I don't think they're divine. I think. Let me see if I can process this really quickly. I think, like I think I said earlier, is that they're just a different dimensional type of entity than we are. And I think leaving offerings is more like, God, they're gonna hear me and be like, bitch. Leaving something out for the stray cat. You know what I mean? To me, it's like, leave something out and it won't piss on your petunias or whatever,
I mean, I love that answer because here's an interdimensional entity that can break reality and steal your gloves and return them. And you're just kind of like, let me just give some like appeasing snacks to the stray cats so they're happy.
That's exactly my thought process is, here, could you please return my stuff, or could you please stop taking my stuff, and we'll just get along and I'll do better about this offer and stuff,
That's fucking wild. I mean, that's a great answer. And when I say like earlier, like that they're a god or whatever, I just meant like so that you understood my question. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have this like zero tolerance policy for anything new age, even though I host this podcast. So.
No, I get it.
I'm not waving feathers and sage around or drawing tarot cards but having done this show, I'm a little remiss to say that my mind has been open to a lot of the validity of that stuff, even though I'm trashing it right this very moment. There is validity there. But for me, anyway, as a working practice of my relationship with the Fae, is I'm just like, they are what they are. I do not fucking understand what they are. They are extremely powerful at times. And so I'm not afraid of them, but I respect that the human skill set and the Fae skill set are not on the same playing field. They're good at their game. We're good at ours. It's different. You know, you can't judge apples and oranges against one another. But having said that, you know, I refuse to engage in anything like an offering or a request for protection or a request for anything for that matter, because I just don't understand them well enough to play any role as it relates to that. That's why I do often ask people who are doing offerings how they feel about it, because it's just such a fascinating thing to learn, you know, how you are reconciling and managing their existence into your own day-to-day reality, you know.
Right. A lot of people are like, oh, be careful. You don't want to make any deals with fairies, or you don't want to, you know, you don't want to get entangled with any kind of unintentionally implied bargain with the fairies. I'm like, look, I'm going to give them this offering. And if my whatever turns up, then we're good. If it doesn't turn up, well, I don't see how that's entering into anything because they didn't fulfill their end of the deal.
And not that you know, but why do you think they take stuff?
I honestly think it's just a mischievous form of entertainment for them. If it's something well loved, maybe there's an energy it gives off that they bask in the glow of, for lack of a better term. Who knows? Why do cats torment squirrels, you know?
I gotta say, Luna, I really like talking with you tonight. I really like your answers and your perspective. Thanks for being you and sharing all this with me.
No problem. Thanks for having me on. This has been fun.
Honestly, maybe the most fascinating thing about the show is how people are integrating these relationships into their lives. It's vastly different from person to person.
It really is. I think I've had a very interesting upbringing, and I had a lot of strange things happen to me early on. And I think that's just set me up for, you know what, I'm here. I'm here to experience this life, and whatever else is in it, I'll experience that too. And I'll just try to hold space and not ruffle too many feathers. And there's so many things that we just cannot explain. And I believe in pretty much everything that from the legends and the lores. And until you can prove it otherwise, I mean, I'll be open-minded about it.
I'm reluctant to say that I'm kind of like you these days, because what's happened is as I go scratching away and digging, I actually just find more and more reinforcing contemporary modern experiences that seem to be echoes of these old stories.
Well, you know, for some reason, humans in modernity think they seem to have answers to everything, so they don't pay attention to the old stories and the lore, and those things came from somewhere. And you know, if it was just one part of the world that talked about fairies and Bigfoot and vampires or what werewolves or whatever, you know, if it was just one part of the world, be like, okay, those people are crazy. But you've got stories of fairies across cultures. You've got stories of Bigfoot, vampires, werewolves, all of that across all cultures. It has to come from somewhere.
I agree. And I've been really guilty on this show in the early season of shitting all over folklore, because I was like, this isn't, and then I've quickly learned it's just the same phenomena being described by people that had less scientific knowledge, and they were describing it in a way that was available to them, you know?
Right.
And like, I'm right there with you on these, like, I just scratch my head when I go online and people are like, this fairy's from the Seelie court and the unseelie court, and don't make this deal and don't do, and I was like, I don't know where people get that or feel so confident in that.
I think the Seelie and the unseelie court is modern invention of man in romance novels. I'd never that's the only place I've ever read it, was in, modern books.
That's where the confusion around this subject matter is rooted, is there's a kind of bleed over from fantasy into the reality of it. Or
Right.
maybe more appropriately, it was intentionally relegated to the position of fantasy as a means of control by the quote unquote evil forces that rule the world currently. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And that's plausible. I mean,
Great way to hide it in plain sight. Just make it seem like a joke.
yeah, if you mock and demonize something to make people less interested in it, well, that's robbing them of that resource, and we can see that happening on the news every night. People being mocked for something, and then that loses their power.
Huh. That's extremely extremely good observation, and you're a really articulate speaker, I've got to say.
Thank you.
Well, Luna, I'll tell you what, because you've mentioned it, you'd be a great podcast host because you gave a great segue point there, talking about all the things that you potentially accept as true, up to and including vampires. Let's hear your vampire story if you feeling open to it.
Sure. I personally, to me, vampires are just a different form of fae. You know, I don't know their origins. I can't explain any of that, but I can tell you what I've seen. And on 2 different instances, I have seen what I would call a vampire. The first time, late 90s, living on that place in the river. And my friends and I, this is what's going to make you laugh. We went to a Waffle House in the middle of the night. And it's 3 of us, and there's this guy in this back booth. I don't know if you've ever been to a Waffle House, but they're set up a very specific way. And he's in the back booth. And this, I can describe him. I was probably 15 or 16 at the time. And 33 years on, I can still tell you what this man looked like. He was wearing a Motorhead t-shirt. It was ripped. It was stained. It was black. His jeans were ripped and stained and blacked. And, upon first look, he just looked like, a metalhead hoodlum of the day. But then you got to looking at him, and he had long black hair, and it looked like someone had tried to cut it with some rusty hedge trimmers. It was greasy. It was matted. He had this strange gray ashen color to his skin that I've only ever seen on a corpse. The whites of his eyes were so bloodshot. We thought he was nursing a hangover, but then the light caught the iris of his eye. And when you look at him without the light catching him, because, we couldn't stop staring at this dude because he was creepy. Just looking at him, you just assumed he had brown eyes, right? The light hit him. He turned his head and looked to talk to the waitress. And when the light caught his eyes, it was like the deepest red glint to the color of his iris. I mean, like, you could call them brown, but they were a red brown. And then surrounded by the bloodshot eyes, the gray skin, the black hair, and the sheer level of malevolence coming off of this guy. Everything about him said run. He had a cup of coffee in front of him that he wasn't really touching. He was just holding it. We were there for a very uncomfortable, probably 45 minutes. And with the way he looked, you'd have thought he would have reeked to high heaven of something. I mean, he literally looked like death warmed over, but he didn't, there was no smell coming off of him. Not like I'm saying, you should be able to smell a person that's sitting at the next table, but just with how unkempt and dirty he looked, you would have assumed some really staggering BO coming off of him. There was nothing. And he just looked I've never, he looked like a poor imitation of a human being.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, when a couple of times I've heard descriptions of these people, and there's a lot to the way that they feel to you. You know what I mean? So I'm really paying attention, as you say, like that extreme negativity that you were getting off of him is a really, really big tell.
Yeah, it was malevolence. Saying it made my skin crawl does not quite describe it correctly. It was like my skin wanted to get up and run. Everything about that man was screaming, run. And the waitress was clearly terrified. Like, she didn't want to go to that table any more than he wanted her at that table. And, we were just trying to be low key, but he knew we were paying attention to him, and therefore he paid attention to us. I could feel his eyes on us all the way into the parking lot. And I'm not the kind of person that can feel when someone's staring at them, but I felt those eyes boring holes in the back of my head.
Yeah, that's a creepy story. That's a really creepy story.
Yeah.
You said you saw another one a second time?
There was one other time, and it was in that same house on the river. There were so many things that happened in that river. That house was so old. It was over 100 years old when we moved in, and it was clearly haunted, but it was before I moved to Alaska, so it was 96. I was 19 or 20. And I was up in my room. It was the middle of the night. It was like 2 a.m. And I woke up out of a dead sleep. And I could just feel that same malevolence, that same run coming from outside. It would have been my bedroom window, but I'm trying to think. I think it was the north side of the house. And so I got up and I looked out my window, and out, standing under a tree. And I mean, we lived 7 miles from town. We were in the middle of nowhere. Under a tree in the full moonlight was a man standing. He had short blonde hair, very pale skin. And that's really all I can tell you about him, because it was, 30, 40 feet away across the yard. And you could just feel the malevolence rolling off of him. And I'm just standing there in the window in the middle of the night, terrified. Why is there a man in my yard? And I just remember saying under my breath, "Go away. You are not welcome here." And then he was gone. There was no movement. He was just gone. And the reason I know it was a person standing by that tree is because the moon was throwing a shadow of a human being from the way it was positioned. So there was a person under that tree, but then they were just gone. And the only reason I think it's a vampire is because just the feeling of malevolence was the same as the guy we saw in the Waffle House.
Intuition is a good guide when it comes to this subject matter. So go with what comes up first is a pretty good rule of thumb, actually.
Yeah. Like I'm jittery talking about this 30 years later. That's how bad it scared me. Those two men.
Honestly, what would somebody be doing out there? That's the first big red flag. But also, it's so interesting that you woke up from a dead sleep to a feeling and then looked out the window and saw him. That must have just absolutely turned your stomach.
Yeah, I woke up in a panic because I could feel danger. And I was full on panic. My parents were downstairs. And like I I couldn't figure out anything in the house, but I could feel something. I could feel it coming from outside. So I just looked out the window and there it was. And I told my parents and they told me I was crazy, but boomers.
You know what? You know what comes up for me? I know this is probably not a real association. Well, sorry, let me just try to say that a little bit better. I'll edit that one spot there.
Okay.
What comes up for me here, and I don't know if this has anything to do with anything or not, is that you woke up and you had that feeling of dread and you went outside and you saw that guy under the tree. And then later, in a totally unrelated thing, someone tried to break into your house and the door was frozen shut.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure it was a person trying to break into your house is what comes up for me.
Well, the person I saw in the middle of the night when I was 19 or 20, that was in Indiana. And the person who tried to break into my house, I was 30 and it was in Alaska. So I don't know if it was necessarily could have been the same person, but the person in Alaska, I didn't feel necessarily the same level of, I didn't feel that same brand of malevolence. So yeah, I was kind of shocked that I never saw what I consider to be a vampire in Alaska with as dark as it is up there in the winter.
Right, because traditionally they try to avoid sunlight.
Yeah, so yeah, if you go off the old mythos.
Right, I'm connecting some details. That's why both of these men that you saw were at night. That makes sense.
Yeah, I've ran across some people that made my skin crawl in the daylight, but I always chalk those up to they're probably serial killers that haven't been caught yet.
Wow. And what I was going for there with the idea the time that your door was frozen shut when there was an intruder was that intruder just simply a man, or was that intruder another type of entity disguised as a man, much like these that you're seeing? And is that why you received such strong protection that day? Makes me wonder. It does sound like you've got a force looking out for you, though, with relation to that door freezing shut. It's extremely interesting.
Yeah, I've been, on the one hand, when it comes to certain aspects of life, I've had very bad luck. But when it comes to supernatural protection, I'm hitting it out of the ballpark.
I got to tell you, Luna, as I sort of spend some time here getting to know you and talking with you, listening to you here tonight, you remind me so much of a lot of the guests that come on this show. I think there's similar personality and life experience traits to people that are experiencing the phenomenon. And I often wonder if the Fae know that they can trust certain people, because those people maintain a good, like an even keel in the face of challenging situations in life. You kind of, I do believe that you can earn the trust of the Fae through your own navigation of your own life and how you do it. Just got to maintain a good heart and you'll be okay.
Absolutely.
I do think that they are trying to communicate with you and others. And I'm starting to wonder why. Is there Ruby, a person I've referenced before, she makes this great analogy where she's like, these episodes are just lighting each other's candles. Someone hears something that you say that reminds them of something that's experienced by them. They share something, so everyone kind of gets a validation from hearing these normal people talking about these extraordinary events. And again, as I listen to you tonight, you really do fit right in here into the kooky club that is the Fascinating Fae Show. So seriously, can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time tonight. As I go to wind these episodes down, I just quickly checked. I see we've been talking for a good hour and a half here, and I try my best to keep the episodes to around 2 hours, out of respect for your time, out of respect for the audience's time. So unless you had any other standout, interesting object stories or other that you'd wanted to share, I could ask you a couple of wind down questions, whatever you prefer.
I mean, I've had things disappear and reappear all my life. I seem to have always had a bit of protection. The only other story I really wanted to share, because It's my first instance I remember encountering the supernatural.
Oh yeah, please tell me.
Okay, so this is my first distinct. I was 6 years old. Um, I'd started realizing I'd been having precognition dreams. So that I feel like ties into this. It wasn't in relation to a dream, but I think it all goes together. Um, I had entered the kitchen one morning when I was 6, and we always had an extra chair in the corner for company. And I looked up, and Jesus was sitting in the chair, but it was only like an outline that you could see through. I don't really know how to say it. I could physically see the form of a man statically sitting in a chair. And I thought, because, I'd been to church 3 times a week since birth, it was Jesus. I discovered at 13, when I saw a picture of my dad for the first time, it was actually my dad. Sitting in the corner checking on me. He died when I was 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I remember screaming at my auntie, and not in fear, but pointing and yelling in excitement, "Jesus is here. Jesus is in the corner. Look, he's sitting right there." And she was like, "Quit lying or you'll go to hell." And I'm like, "No, he's in robes. He has a beard. He's got long hair, all of it." Nope, nope, nope. So we never talked about that again. And then the first time I saw a picture of my birth father, I was like, that explains that then.
I got a lot of goosebumps when you told me that story too. I believe that was your dad. Usually when I get that response to something, it's because someone's telling the truth. That's my working theory on why that happens to me when I'm listening to people. Really interesting.
Yeah, it's something resonated with you there.
Well, I often wonder, like, the deceased, the fae, archetypal, like gods and goddesses, like you hear about, nature spirits, earth energies. I wonder, like, is all of this just absolutely real, and we've just forgotten that we're living in this incredibly trippy reality,
I think it's real. I think there are reasons that we don't observe things the way that people were able to observe them even 100 years ago. I think the rise of, and this is just going to sound crazy, but bear with me, the rise of electricity and infrastructure and electrical grids and chemicals they put in our foods, and all of that is dampening our ability to observe the nature around us.
It doesn't sound crazy at all. I'm a big advocate for lessening your chemical load big time. I really, not to get all preachy, but I'm vegan, I'm chemical free. I'm not joking. Like, in my house, it's like Castile soap and vinegar. That's maximum what I'm using to clean up. Because all of these food additives, all of these detergents, chemical cleaners, all of it is actually impacting your ability to function at your full potential as a human soul. And take that for what it is.
I believe that.
And that's not to say that if you are currently drenched in, the byproducts of Maine society, you're not able to be spiritual, not whatsoever. But I do think that there is a bit of a knowledge around the impact that these things have, not just on health, but on spiritual capability. And that, in my estimation, a large percentage of the distribution of these products into the system of distribution for everyone's food and clothes and everything is an attempt to sever people from their innate spiritual capabilities. Because then they're easier to control and the status quo can be maintained. So
I absolutely agree. I'm a very low chemical household. I try not to use plastic.
oh my God, me too.
Um, plastic, I think, is the number one thing that is dampening our ability to observe our natural world.
I could just jump through this fucking phone and kiss you because I have an ongoing conversation, let's just call it, with my partner, Julia, in which I'm trying to explain to her my severe distaste for plastics in my environment is because it makes it impossible for me to do this show the way that I want to be doing it, basically. Which is, I'm trying to draw the spiritual truth, quote unquote, as a non-New Age guy. I'm trying to just show everybody this shit is real. Look twice,
Yeah. I mean, microplastics are in our bodies now. They're in our brains, our bones, our organs. How does that affect us?
The frequency modulation of these chemical detergent smells and even the plastic off-gassing, we are existing on a frequency band, like as a human being. And, when something doesn't make you feel good and it has a bad smell associated to it as well, I do think that that's a type of frequency modulation attack that is intentionally being, deployed into the populace.
Yeah, I mean, all of our clothes pretty much are made out of plastic too. So, I mean, we're drenching ourselves in this, what I feel to be spiritually dampening substance, and it makes us easier to manipulate all the way around.
Oh my God, I could just jump through the phone again. You're very articulate. This is exactly how I feel. I think for everyone listening, this is an important moment because this is a true component into breaking free from whatever stuckness is impacting you. It does have a lot to do with like the objects around you. I've often said too, and this is hard to get your head around at first, but like objects and products can modulate your mood and give you emotions that you don't normally have, like heavy exposure to plastics, polyesters in your clothes, like fake fragrances in your detergents and your body care products. These will actually produce emotions. They're not just going to like make you feel sick or low energy. They will produce emotions that are unwanted, including anxiety, fear, anger. These are a direct response of the body to the attack and the exposure that it's experiencing. But people confuse it and they just think that they don't feel well, which then leads them to seek medical attention for their mood disorders, which then leads them to becoming medicated more often than not. And that's actually the incorrect solution. The solution that is preferable is to limit exposure to frequency and emotionally modulating chemicals. That's what you really need to do.
Yep, exactly.
We fucking understand each other, Luna.
Oh yeah. I can tell you the difference in my mood between the days I wear all natural fibers and a day where I have to wear something that is polyester or has polyester in it. Like it's an absolute mood killer.
I'm literally like right now having like the most validating feeling you could possibly imagine. Yes.
Us chronically ill people, we're gonna solve this shit. We're the canaries in the coal mine.
Actually, that's why the Fae are choosing to work with the traumatized and the ill, because I don't know how it's so complicated to articulate the interrelationship that I'm trying to describe, but I think you and I understand each other without me having to say it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think the fairies find the people that need them the most.
Yes, and those with the most potential to impact change in others as well.
I agree.
Like the underdog, the meek shall inherit the earth. It's right up that bowling alley somehow, somewhere in that range,
I think it's kind of like, you know how the best leaders are the ones who never wanted power in the first place?
Yeah, perfectly said. You're so articulate. Really well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job there. That was great. Exactly that. It's like the ones who it just makes sense that of course they're going to be chosen. But what's really weird is that the lived experience of many of those people, and I'll say hello to all my guests and listeners tonight as I'm saying this, is one where they don't always get it, and then they feel really marginalized and isolated for the most part. So half of the work of the show is trying to demonstrate there's many, many more people like you than you think. You're not the only hypersensitive person who's also having contact with the Fae. Now, is that a corollary or a anecdotal thing? I don't know, but I do think it's corollary. I think it's part of the recipe of contact, in fact.
Well, like back in the day, unicorns wouldn't come to anybody but virgins, the innocent. Maybe the Fae have a similar MO.
No, definitely they've got a morality compass that is pretty high water. Like they don't like corruption, basically.
No.
Wow. Okay. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating tail end of this conversation with you tonight, Luna.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, just to keep it, within the constraints of podcast, constraints, I'll just ask you my favorite going away question that I ask everybody.
Sure.
And I'll just give the quick caveat by saying, thank you again. Sincerely appreciate your time. I could talk to you much longer. I just do this because I try to respect everyone's time who's listening. Okay, so no right answer, no wrong answer, but a deceptively simple question. Luna, what do you think fairies are?
Oh, wow. I think they are interdimensional creatures that are trying to give us a message. I think maybe it's my hope and fear, but I hope they're trying to save us from ourselves. Maybe they're trying to bring a little magic back into the world. Maybe they're beings that are screaming to be seen, like a lot of us. But I think they're trying to help us, and we really need to listen.
That's an extremely quality answer, and I actually echo a lot of that. Well, Luna, I'll tell you what I usually do at this point in the show is I just sort of get ready to sign off, but I always give my guests the last word. So if you want to just meditate for a moment while I do my podcaster housekeeping, I will invite you back in a second for your last word here as we go to say goodbye tonight.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Well, for everyone listening, you've been listening tonight to Fascinating Fae. I'm your host, Jim. If you've had objects go missing and reappear, like a pair of gloves, for example, and you'd like to be on the show, you can shoot me an email, encounters@fascinatingfae.com, or you can hit me up on any social media, like Facebook, Messenger, Instagram, DM. That's cool too. Just get a hold of me and let me know if you'd like to come on the show. Luna, with that said, what I will say is this, which is that on behalf of all of our human and non-human listeners that are tuning in to Fascinating Fae tonight, a super big thanks to you, Luna, for coming on the show all the way from Oklahoma. Thanks a lot for being here tonight. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
I had fun too. I sincerely mean that. With all that said and behind us, if you'd be so kind as to share your last words here with the audience listening, I would be so grateful.
If you have things in your home that continually go missing and you don't know why, try feeding your brownies. Try a dish of milk or cream or even vodka. A lot of times it just is trial and error figuring out what they like. But I promise you, if you start feeding your brownies, things will stop going missing.
To the crack of daylight, the hills alive with the red sunrise, and you pace the path. The trail resumes, you're gonna arrive in the city by the yellow full moon. And she walks to you exactly as you wanted to. Yeah, she walks to you only. Look out! making no sense. And the leathers and furs, and you're losing your head. You picture a strip, gonna die for a kiss from her rose-red lips. Then she walks to you exactly as you wanted to. Yeah, she walks to you only. Look out! She's a vampire. Get ready to suck your blood. She's a vampire. Those eyes pierced through, now you're hypnotized. Don't try to hide, just run for daylight. Those eyes pierced through, now you're hypnotized.